Ever snapped at your child and thought, why did I do that? That is not the parent I want to be. Or you watched your children lose it over something seemingly small and wondered, what is actually going on here? Turns out behaviour is never random. There's always something happening beneath it, and it always makes sense. I'm Jackie Hall, and this is Beneath Behaviour, where we break down stress, reactions, and get to the heart of why we all do the things we do. We'll have real conversations, find real solutions, and have absolutely no judgment. Let's talk.
Understanding you, understanding them, understanding you. You can rise, 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 see beyond the fight. There's a story underneath, hidden in the light. Beneath Behavior podcast, there's more to see.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Beneath Behaviour podcast, where we're looking to understand what's going on behind your behaviour and your emotions and your child's emotions and behaviours too. Now, last week we were talking about the topic of meltdowns, and I deliberately made this a two-part series because it's important that we're looking at meltdowns from the perspective of what can be done outside of the moment and then what can be done in the moment. And last week we were talking about the super framework that I have discussed in more detail in episode 9, but using that super framework to know what different areas we need to explore when we're thinking about a meltdown and trying to understand why that meltdown makes sense. In the last episode, we looked at what the difference was between a meltdown, a tantrum, and a shutdown, and what's happening from a nervous system perspective. And then we looked at how your self-awareness, so the super framework, self-awareness, understanding, prepare, plan, teach, environment and culture, and relationships can all form important elements to look at in the overall answer to helping your child and supporting your child through meltdowns. This episode is about what you can do in the moment of a meltdown, because those strategies are super important as well. We just don't want to neglect what can be done outside of the moment of the meltdowns, because that can prevent them from happening in the first place. But I get that no matter how much effort you put in, or how much research or curiosity or planning or management or teaching goes into helping your child, there are still going to be days where they feel emotionally overwhelmed and their nervous system is going to act from a survival perspective, and they're going to go into fight, flight, or freeze mode or shutdown mode. And so it's important for parents to understand what to do and what not to do when your child is facing a meltdown. And we can absolutely use that super framework when we're looking at it. We just do it in a more brief way, because when your child is having a meltdown in that moment, the behaviors can be quite intense. So you don't have a lot of time to be analyzing what's going on for you. So it can be helpful to really memorize that super framework so that you can very quickly be asking, okay, self-awareness, what's going on for me? How am I being in this moment? Am I in conflict with reality? And we talk about this a lot in episode 2 when we talked about the stressful thinking lenses, stress being a conflict between belief, what I think should be happening, versus the reality of what's actually happening. You may very quickly in the moment of a tantrum or a meltdown catch yourself rolling around in a narrative about how, here we go again, this shouldn't be happening, I don't know what to do. And you're going to have to very quickly shelve that and go, hey, Jack, you're in conflict with reality. Jump into the world of reality. Reality is, this is what's happening for my child. So what am I going to do about it? So that's how quickly we can use these different steps from the super framework, getting into that self-awareness, getting into that, how am I contributing? How am I feeling? What do I need to do to regulate myself very, very quickly? It can be as quickly as taking some deep breaths in that moment, reorienting yourself to the present moment and away from that narrative that wants to discuss why this shouldn't be happening, or that you feel out of control, or I don't know what to do. Stop, come back into the present moment, feel what you're feeling, just take a few deep breaths, focus on your child, jump into that understanding mode. That's the next step, is looking at understanding what must be going on for them. What's causing this meltdown? What is their body trying to tell me? Sometimes it won't be obvious what's going on for them to cause the meltdown in the first place. Sometimes it will, and you may be able to help them out with that just by going into this curiosity mode of going, okay, this behavior makes sense in some way. I just need to figure out what's going on for them. And it could just be that you don't know, but the nervous system is telling you what's going on for them right now, what it's needing right now, or what it's trying to pursue. In the last episode, I talked about how the nervous system is always trying to pursue pleasure or avoid pain. It's trying to feel safe. It's trying to survive. So even if you don't know the cause of why your child is melting down in this moment, you can look at the nervous system and attune to the nervous system to look at what it's trying to do to recover from whatever it is that happened. And you can use that information to help you know what to do next. Now, one thing that I did forget back in the self-awareness side of things is part of what you're contributing to that meltdown. Once you're starting to see your child escalate, it's important for you to not get into what we call a conflict cycle. So what often happens is the child has there's a stressful situation that happens, and your child responds to that stressful situation, and then in whatever way that they do, so their behavior is their response to that behavior, to that situation, and then you have a response to their response. And then so you try to maybe you get reactive, maybe you feel out of control, maybe you try to minimize what's happening for them or talk sense into what's happening for them and talk them out of their feelings or argue with what their standpoint is. You're having some sort of reaction that then triggers them into having a reaction on your reaction, and then you react the way to what they're reacting to, and you just keep going round and around in this conflict cycle. So being very aware of whether you've fallen into that conflict cycle and maybe need to pull yourself out of that conflict cycle as quickly as possible and need it in what so that you can de-escalate the situation or prevent it from escalating any further. So this is the self-awareness element of it. When we're looking at that understanding side of things, we're looking to get a sense of whether this is reactive aggression or reactive behavior where their emotions are overloaded, their thinking brain is offline, they're in that fight or flight survival response, or whether it's proactive behavior, whether their cognitions are online, they are thinking, their behavior is deliberate. And last week I talked about how you can recognize the difference between a meltdown and a shutdown and a tantrum. So be sure to have a look at that last episode to figure that out. But from that, you can have a look at what's going on for them. The other thing in the understanding element is recognizing that there are different stages of a full-blown meltdown, and there's different things that we can do at each one of these stages. Now, the first stage is just baseline, and it's important that we get an understanding of what baseline looks like for your child, getting a sense of how do they normally behave when they're happy or when they're content or when they're calm, because every child's going to have a different baseline. Like you might have a child with high energy, and then their baseline might be very loud or running around doing certain things, or, hyperactive, or your child's baseline might very well be that they're very quiet or they're happy to be on their own. And their tone of voice may be at a certain level when they're at baseline, when they're happy. So it's very important that you get an understanding of what baseline looks like. And this can be really helpful for any other relationships that your child has, or any other caregivers that might look after your child, that helps them to recognize these different stages of a meltdown as well, so that they can be doing things to prevent the full escalation from happening. So once you understand what baseline looks like, you can then start to look at what triggered looks like. So a triggering event happens. So that's the next stage of the meltdown process, where something happens and your child has a response to it. Now, you'll see a change in their behavior, in their tone of voice, in what they say, in how they say it, in their facial expressions, in their body languages. So we've got to be really attuned to what's going on for your child to get a sense of, oh, hang on a minute, something just happened, because there may not be something obvious to you that's happened, but there may be a shift in something that in the way that they're presenting or the way that they're feeling in that moment, the way they're behaving in that moment, that suggests to you there has been a triggering event. Because a triggering event can be a thought that I had, some situation from yesterday or a week ago that I'm ruminating now on, or some realization that I've got to go somewhere tomorrow, and all of a sudden the thought process and the narrative just goes crazy and they start to escalate themselves to the point where they're getting really worked up. And so this is why we want to have these in the moment strategies, because no matter how much planning or curiosity you do or teaching that you do, like I said before, you may not know what happens. And then all of a sudden you're dealing with a triggered child. So when you're in this moment, it's important to understand that when your child is initially triggered, there are lots of things that you can do, because when they're initially triggered, it means that their cognitions are still online. So you can really use your relationship to connect with them, to talk to them, to validate them, to de-escalate them through words. That can be helpful depending on what the trigger was to begin with and what your relationship is like and what exactly you're saying to them. So you want to be really validating to begin with, saying, like, recognizing where they're at. I can see something's bothered you. You know, I can see you're upset about something. Tell me more. Invite them to talk to you. Invite them to express to you what's going on so that they can talk it out instead of acting it out. Helping them feel safe in that environment, helping them to, you might have to remove them from a certain situation in order to prevent the thing from triggering them even more. So it could be really obvious that they're feeling triggered by a sibling or another person or an environment that they might be in. And so the initial answer might be to remove them from that environment so that you can work through with them what that challenge is or what that barrier is, and you may be able to help them because cognitions are online at this point. But try not to do that before you validate and see them. People like to be seen. Everybody wants to be seen. Everybody wants to be understood. Everybody wants to know that their feelings matter. So you want to kind of recognize where they're at. You want to meet your child where they are at. And this is through all of the stages, but particularly in that triggering stage, we just want to be with them in that triggered state, not literally you be in that triggered state, but meet them at that triggered state and go, okay, they're triggered. Let's not try to talk them out of it. Let's not try to, dismiss what's going on for them. Let's just acknowledge it, validate it, and talk it through on, after you've removed them from the situation if you can. So recognizing that they're triggered is the second stage. The next stage is where they're starting to really escalate. And that's where their emotions are starting to get bigger. You'll start to see that their behaviors are a little bit louder, more expressive, maybe more aggressive if that's how they present their behaviors. They're starting to feel more panicked in their nervous system. Their nervous system is using measures that have more impact in order to survive. That survival mechanism is starting to take over. That cognitive side of things is starting to shut down. This is where you want to use your relationship in a non-verbal way as much as possible. So you still want them to try to talk it out or express it out, but you don't want to be arguing. You don't want to be using logic and reasoning. You want to just be going, tell me more. I understand. Gosh, that must be really hard. That would be terrible to feel that way. Like really validating responses, helping them to express it out if they can. It may be that you say nothing, that you're with them. So this is where I have the 3 C's of overcoming barriers, where we're talking about communication, collaboration, and co-regulation. Now, collaboration is not for the escalation phase. That can be used in the triggering event where you can be collaborating, working with your child to work through the problem, work through the challenge, maybe help scaffold it a little bit, do parts of something that might be challenging for them, or come up with part of solution, get them to work with you on things. You might be able to do that at the triggering event, but at the escalation event, typically you're not really using the collaboration. It's about very little communication and more so co-regulation, where you are working with your child's nervous system, because the nervous system is starting to take over from logic and reasoning. So you might just use few amounts of words. You want to help the child to feel quite safe in their environment. And this is where you might also need to look at the environment that your child is around. So this can mean that you are walking around your house as the child is escalating and just kind of removing certain objects or things that can be used or thrown or used as weapons. And I don't mean that in any kind of, deliberate, nasty way. It's just, sometimes when we're angry, we want to pick up something and throw it, or we want to smash on the ground. This can be our way, our nervous system's way of releasing the pent up emotions. And so this is why in co-regulation, we want to try and be in tune with what's happening with the child. We want to kind of be aware that that nervous system is trying to do something in order to get back to its balance, its equilibrium. And it may not be logical and it may not be moral what it's trying to do, but what you're trying to do, hopefully, and I get, again, this isn't easy because you might be in a dysregulated state yourself, is to be looking at what that nervous system is trying to do, so that maybe you could help that nervous system to express that energy in a different way. So it could be that you are going to meet the child where they are at. This is the co-regulation. That if, say, for example, they're feeling, they're starting to yell and get really angry, you might match that tone, not the energy, not the aggression, not the anger. You might match the volume and the tone, and you might go, I know, I get it. I understand. That's so frustrating, isn't it? So you're not arguing with them. You're agreeing with them. You're validating them, but you're doing it at the same energetic level that they are, so that you're co-regulating. You're meeting where they're at. And co-regulation is almost like this kind of dance between they're doing something, you're doing something to match, and then you're doing something that hopefully brings that nervous system along with you. So you might reduce that intensity and you go, oh, it's just so frustrating, isn't it? And they may match you a little bit. They may come down a little bit more, so then you're kind of going, let's come over here. You're starting to become that regulated state. So when we think of co-regulation, a lot of the time we're often thinking about, I'm going to go into a regulated state, and therefore you're going to be in a regulated state. And because I'm in a regulated state, sometimes that works. Sometimes if you're lowering your voice, you're changing the spatial distance between you, like they're standing up, you're sitting down, you're staying in a calm voice, you're saying, I'm here for you, you're applying pressure, or you're giving them a hug, or you're being there with them in a very calm and regulated way, that can absolutely bring your child down. Sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes we've got to go to them. So another example might be that your child is screaming and yelling and tantruming, and you might walk up to your child and you can go, yes, that's what we need. Let's get it out. And you might start jumping up and down and shouting as well and roaring. You might get down on your hands and knees if you have a younger child and actually start roaring like a lion and actually moving that energy that might be pent up, because you might find that your child their nervous system is trying to express that emotion. They just might be doing it in a destructive way or a harmful way. So we're trying to direct them to be able to do it in a way that's safer for them and safer for others. You might have a certain area of the house where you're able to punch pillows or throw pillows, or, there might be an area outside that you can go smack a ball against a wall, because some of those real hard hitting things are what we want to do. They've started to bring out in, for fun, these, I don't know what you call them, but there's these places where you can go and smash things. You can smash dishes, and you can, they put you in these suits with eyeglasses, and you can, just break stuff. people donate stuff so that you can just like smash a TV or throw something against a wall, because they're realizing that it can be helpful to get these pent up emotions out. But a lot of the time we've been told to stuff them down, that we'll just do some breathing exercises and we'll try and calm down. And a lot of the times the kids are just like, the kids' nervous systems are going, I don't want a bar of that. I don't want to, I don't want to breathe. I'm not in that place yet to breathe, to calm down. I need to let go of some energy first, and then I may be able to start to regulate my breathing. So, there's no one size fits all when we're trying to help your child to regulate their emotions. It's recognizing what kind of works for you and attuning to what their nervous system is needing in that moment. So on the flip side of things, if you have a child that shuts down, the nervous system response might be that we're now trying to get it to move. We're trying to get it to become more active because it's dissociated from the situation, because it thinks that staying still and not saying anything or not doing anything is its only chance of staying safe. So we have to remember throughout all of these behaviors that the nervous system is trying its best to do whatever it needs to do to stay safe. And we're helping it to stay safe. That's what co-regulation is. You're helping it to co-regulate to a place where it feels regulated and safe. And sometimes we have to start with where the child is at. But for other children, it could be that your regulated, calm state is exactly what is needed, and that's what helps them to de-escalate quite quickly. So I'm by no means saying that for your child, if they're, yelling and shouting and expressing things in an angry or aggressive way, that you have to get on the floor and, growl like a lion. That may not be working for your child. But for some people who've tried the calm breathing approach and they're having nothing of it, it could be that you're doing this kind of dance where you start with that level of intensity and you bring it back and you watch their response. And then they may start to match you. And then you may be able to start to de-escalate and breathe and say, why don't we go over here and smash up some pillows? Or, you get out your own aggression, just go, I get it. Sometimes I'm angry too. I want to just hit something. So you're remembering at this escalation stage, you're not saying too much. So however you can express it within your body or your tone of voice or your gestures is going to be much better than trying to have full sentence conversations, because as the brain is escalating, that thinking, logic, reasoning, processing part of the brain is not functioning correctly. So they can't hear you. It's not that they won't hear you. It's not that they're being defiant. They can't hear what you're saying. So we're needing to just express through our body and through our actions what co-regulation is and help that nervous system first. Then we can look at logic and reasoning later. So we've got this pre-crisis state, this baseline state. Then we've got a triggering event where you may be able to communicate well with them. You may be able to distract. You may be able to assist. You may be able to collaborate with them on problem solving. We've got this escalation stage where there may not be as much collaborating going on. There may not be as much language going on. We're moving more into a nervous system response, a co-regulation response, very little communication. And then we've got full-blown outburst. This is definitely where there is no logic and reasoning going on. We are in full survival mode. We are working 100% with the nervous system, not logic and reasoning. So you are saying very little. You are looking at whether you need to give your child some space, whether they're safe to be in their own space to co-regulate. I would still, depending on the age of the child and depending on their needs, stay close. I would say still, I'm here for you. You don't want that child to feel abandoned in their actions or in their time of need. But you may be too much in their face if you are trying to work with them on their nervous system. They may not need that. They just may need to be alone, but you want to let them know, I'm here for you if you need me. You may have them in their bedroom and you're sitting outside the door. So if you've got to remove them from a situation, you don't want them to feel like they're being punished or they're in trouble for being removed from that situation. You want to let them know in as few words as possible, let's come over here. Sometimes a directive can be really helpful because their thinking brain isn't online. Because when and I use an example of when you're doing a really hard workout, like let's say you're in a competition and you've got a certain set of things that you need to do in a gym workout. So I do CrossFit, for example. So I often use this example. When I'm in a full-blown workout and I can't think straight, it is so helpful to have someone come along and go, you just need to do 10 burpees, 10 burpees. Now you need to do 20 box jumps, and they count 1, 2, 3. Like, it's a different situation. I get that. But I'm using it in terms of when you are in survival mode, which you are when you're intensely working out, you're not thinking straight. You're just doing whatever you can do to survive. So if you've got someone who is just giving you a directive, come over here. Let's go over here. Something that isn't demanding, but it's just a directive statement that it could even be, this works for some kids, I know, not always, look at me, or sit down, or punch the pillow. Something that gives them a directive of what to do without a whole conversation about it. This is also why this super framework is so helpful, because you could tell your child when they're in a baseline calm state what we're going to do in the moment. Next time we have a meltdown, this is what we could do, and collaborate with them outside of the moment to help them so that in the moment when you give that directive, they understand this is what we can do. So that outburst stage is a time for complete regulation. You might use those co-regulation techniques I just talked about. You may separate them and give them some time to themselves. They might need a pressure hug. They might need a pressure blanket. So it's looking at what works for your child, looking at it outside of the moment. So you already have those strategies inside of the moment. We don't want to be getting to these outburst modes and not have a strategy. That's what's going to cause you to become dysregulated and stop you from being able to co-regulate with your child, because you're not even attuning to them, because your nervous system is attuning to your own dysregulation in your own survival mode, which sometimes can't be helped. So that's in no way any kind of judgment. Sometimes because of the way your child is expressing that meltdown, you may be in survival mode yourself. You may be in protective mode yourself, and it may just be one big complete schmozzle that you, at the end of that meltdown, you just go, neither of us handled that really well. Like, that was just chaos. And that's where you then move into a recovery mode. Now, every meltdown should end with a recovery mode in some way, shape, or form. Because remember that your child has just had a massive emotional moment. And when they come out of that and those cognitions, that logic and reasoning comes back online, what tends to happen is they go into a lot of shame or guilt or self-hatred because of the way that they acted. No child wants to act like this. No child wants to have a meltdown or feel the way that they're feeling. So it's important that we recover. And we have some moment when they're back to baseline, completely back to baseline. And this could be something that happens hours later when they've been at baseline, or the next day even when you reflect on it. But there needs to be some sort of recovery mode. And recovery can include repair work. Let's say there was a rupture in the relationship between you and your child. Maybe they hurt you, or maybe you got reactive and yelled at them, or you weren't validating what was going on, or you weren't doing any of the things that I talk about in any of these 2 episodes. Let's say that happens. There needs to be a reconnect so that you're able to say, I'm sorry, I didn't handle that very well. Or your child is able to express how they now feel now that they've had that moment, and you guys can work through it together. This is where the collaboration, one of the 3 C's, comes in, that you can work with your child. What happened? What was going on for them? What can we do differently next time? Let's strategize what we can do next time. Now, how well you're going to be able to do that is going to depend a lot on your relationship. And this is why that super framework, out of context, out of the moment of a tantrum or a meltdown or a shutdown, is so important. Because how your relationship is built, the relationship capital that you have, the love, the camaraderie, the fun, the connection that you have, the good times that you have, that's going to be a great buffer to these challenging times that you have with your child. And whether you've earned the right with your child, and by earn the right, I mean they trust you, they want to open up to you, they want to discuss these things with you because you've earned the right for them to have those kinds of conversations. They feel safe with you. They don't feel judged with you. They don't feel worth less with you, because trust me, a lot of the time they're already feeling worthless. They don't need anybody to add to it. And so we don't want to have judgment about what just happened. We want to work through, why does it make sense? We want to get curious about it. And sometimes that may need to happen in stages. The most important thing is that your child knows, I'm okay, that this relationship between us is okay, even though we had this rupture, even though there was this outburst, even though they might have trashed the house or hurt something. It's not okay, of course. We're not saying that it's okay that the child acts out the way that they are. But what we have to understand is that when a full meltdown is happening, that child does not have a say in how they express that emotion until they are taught how to express that emotion differently. And they're going to need that help, because a lot of the time we don't have that, because that logic and reasoning is offline. We're in a default survival mechanism. And so we don't know what we're doing. We don't know how to make things different in that moment. We need that level of support. And obviously, as the child gets older and we're working on this in the prepare, plans, teach side of things, and they're learning to understand the world a little bit more, their logic and reasoning is developing a little bit more. This won't be forever. You'll keep working on it. It'll keep getting better, because they're learning how to regulate from that bottom up, from that nervous system perspective, and you're helping them to do that. And they're also learning how to move from the escalation stage back down to baseline without it going into full outburst mode. So there's a process that's going on here for your child of living and learning and developing and practicing, and you're doing it alongside with them, and neither of you are going to get it right all the time. It's going to be a bit of hit and miss. It's going to be highs and lows, and going back to the drawing board and going, okay, what was happening? What made sense? What was that triggering event? What caused that escalation? Can I look at it from a self-awareness perspective? Did I handle it well? Did I not handle it well? Did I forget to do something that I know really, really works? And how can I strategize so I remember that next time? Or what strategies can I put in place whenever this starts to happen? Because I can guarantee you are going to feel so much more regulated and in control if you have a plan. And you don't have to plan for knowing every single trigger that's going to happen. You just need to plan for, what are my go-to strategies for helping my child's nervous system when they go into a meltdown? And from that perspective, then we can go, okay, let's try to understand that behavior. That's the second part of the super framework. Let's make sense of what happened for my child, what was going on for them, what were they thinking, what were they feeling. You might have to look for clues if your child is non-speaking or they won't speak to you about it. It might be that hopefully they can speak to you about it and express what's been going on for you. That's something that you may need to develop out of context, is being able to talk about the challenges that we face. So you may have to have conversations with your child, not in the moment of those tantrums, but outside of the moment in many different ways, talking to them. This is where that environment and culture starts to come in, where we talk about mistakes, we talk about learning, we talk about, overcoming challenges and finding solutions. And we talk about it being okay to not know and okay to make mistakes, and how we bounce back from that. So we talk about resilience, and we talk about how we can build that sense of resilience so that they're learning not just about that meltdown, but they're learning in general that it's okay to talk about these things. It's okay to have these feelings inside of us, or it's okay to talk to you about certain things, and you give them evidence that you're not judging, that you're not criticizing, that you're not being dismissive, that you are being validated, that you are interested in them and you do want to work with them, because all of that, again, is building that relationship capital that encourages them to be able to talk about the tough things. Because a lot of the times kids do shut down on talking about these tough things and talking about their emotions because sometimes they've been shut down and we've unknowingly shut them down. We've tried to talk them out of their problems. We haven't validated. We haven't understood. We've been quick to fix instead of understand first. So all of that is part of understanding relationship, your self-awareness, and the environment and culture that you're raising your child in. All of these can be really incredible buffers to helping that recovery process of the meltdown cycles. So I know I've kind of, hopefully that's been coherent. There's so much that I've wanted to add in there, and then I kept kind of going, oh, remember this, and try to always put it in some sort of coherent way. So hopefully you are able to get from that some strategies that you're able to use, being the different stages of the meltdown process, including recovery, and also how you can use that super framework in that moment. One thing I do want to add is you might have noticed that in the moment, I used self-awareness, I used understanding, I used environment and culture. Environment being I'm walking around and looking at, managing the environment, making sure it's safe, making sure there's nothing they can hit or throw or do anything with. And then the relationship side of things, do you notice what I didn't use is the P, prepare, plan, teach. We are not planning, we are not teaching, we are not preparing, we are not doing anything that uses logic and reasoning and rationale and teaching and executive functioning and processing and organizing and planning and any of those things, because the higher you get on that escalation, the less they're able to process that information. It is not a time to teach. We can do that at baseline. We can do that outside of that moment. We don't do it in the moment. So that's an important thing that I wanted to add in there. So remember the super framework, remember the different stages of escalation. And if you want to know more about how to work on helping your child to prevent meltdowns and shutdowns and tantrums and in the moment and out of the moment and anything else you want to support your autistic child with, please know that we have our 9-week autism parenting program that you can join, where we go through all of this in so much detail that you will be armed with an enormous amount of strategies to help your child to thrive in this world. So thank you again for being on this episode. I look forward to seeing your comments and hopefully seeing you on one of our programs soon. Take care, guys, and bye for now. Are you looking for more parenting support? Visit the Parental Stress Centre for expert-led programs designed to help you and your child to thrive. Find out more at parentalstresscentre.com.